News!
Okay, we'll start with this. The latest on Alicia Baumgardner's ongoing ped fiasco. Dan Rayfield tweeted, per a source with knowledge of the request, Alicia Baumgardner has asked for her B sample to be tested. Her A sample was positive for a ped, and usually what's in the A sample is also in the B sample because the samples themselves are the same sample,
Packaged separately.
though collected on the same day. I've seldom ever heard that what's in the A sample isn't in the B sample. More often than not, if there's some kind of substance or some kind of chemical in the A sample, it's also in the B sample, to which Alicia Baumgardner responded, here's a factual headline. Alicia Baumgardner has made no request and is still in the process of investigating all of the very complex conditions and details surrounding how her sample collection and testing was performed and determining what steps should be taken next.
This has been a public relations nightmare because when the boxing community makes up their mind, they make up their mind irrespective of what the fighter might have to say.
Dan Rayfield responded to Alicia Baumgardner's tweet saying, the WBA has also now confirmed to me the request to test the B sample was made. Perhaps somebody on Alicia's team spoke for her when they shouldn't have.
Just looks bad.
It's a public relations nightmare is what it is. Two-time WBO champion Christina Linardatu reacted to the news by saying, after the fight with Alicia, her trainer asked me the difference between the first and the second fight. I told him that the only difference was that this time she was stronger. Now I understand why. To which Alicia responded, strength was never my issue. You felt that in 2018 and said that yourself. So the only thing that got stronger was my will to win, my understanding that you were never on my level.
Might be what Alicia Baumgardner has to say about it, but to Christina Linardatu, those are hollow words. I mean, imagine if you're in Christina's shoes and you actually beat this fighter before, only for you to fight this fighter again, and this is what happens. This is what turns out.
The end result, Christina responded by saying, you have a lot of nerve. I beat you in 2018, and I was probably going to do it again, but you had the extra boost. Fighting in your hometown with 2 referees from Detroit and 1 from Miami wasn't enough. Waiting for you to prove you're innocent.
But I don't think that's possible.
Doesn't bother me to lose. I work on my mistakes to make myself better, but I won't forgive going through hell after giving birth to fight to a high level and face a cheater. Let's wait to find out the truth.
The truth is, no matter what Alicia Baumgardner says, no matter how vehement she is about her innocence, a lot of people aren't going to believe her, including Christina Linardatu. If you're Christina, why would you?
It's the inconvenient truth for Alicia. Why would Christina Linardatu, on the heels of all of this, take Alicia's word for it? Why would she believe her?
If you're Christina, you have no reason to.
Alicia Baumgardner responded by saying, I used to admire you as a confident, athletic black woman who was pretty much the same build as I do, but now you choose to body shame. You need to stop. I'm sure you know how that feels.
In response to an image that Christina posted citing Alicia's musculature as a red flag that she's on something, and she's always been on something.
The public relations nightmare is what it is, and it has spilled over into the ongoing Matchroom versus Queensberry rivalry. As Frank Warren stated, what I found concerning was apparently, allegedly, she was going to leave Matchroom.
What's that supposed to mean?
That drug-free sports tests various other athletes, and their lab reports go back to the organizations. The lab reports for her went back to Matchroom. What concerns me is that drug-free sport do not have these standards and do not test for the substances that VADA test for and UCAD test for.
What's Frank trying to say?
Sounds like what he's trying to say is that there may be foul play at work here, that based on what he heard, because she was going to leave Matchroom, and because the results, at least according to him, went back to Matchroom as opposed to the organizations, Matchroom may have sabotaged her.
That's what it sounds like he's trying to say.
If she was to have a hearing, and at that hearing, if she's found to be guilty, she should be banned. What I found concerning is that she allegedly was going to leave Matchroom and go sign with Jake Paul.
This is more or less what Jessica McCaskill was insinuating 2 or 3 days ago, that Matchroom could be the culprit, that Matchroom could be at fault, and they may have sabotaged her on the premise that her contract was up.
Seems like a stretch to me, Frank continued. So you can look into that which way you want. Warren concludes by hinting hinting at something similar to McCaskill's comments on the Boxing Voice, linking the time she had remaining on her Matchroom deal with her failing a drug test.
Now, Eddie Hearn isn't taking these comments lying down.
Very recently spoke to Boxing Social about Frank's contentions and their legitimacy.
Yeah, desperate really. I don't know why it's concerning to him. I mean, I know there's no air conditioning in the venues he does shows in, but he was obviously went to his head. I don't know, I saw his comments about like substances and all that. I mean, I don't know why he's criticising someone who is paying for additional testing, and they're criticising about they only test for certain things, but we're talking about a positive adverse finding. So they must be doing an okay job, but also he was completely wrong with everything he said. Alicia Baumgardner has got till April on her contract next year. We've also got first last. We're also negotiating a new deal. We're also planning for her to fight the winner of Taylor against Cameron. So, but I mean, I think the problem is it's very disheartening. You don't want to be attacked by small hall promoters, but at the same time, that's their job. You have to be trying to put yourself up with the big boys. And, I don't know. It's obviously an American situation as well with drug-free sport. I know Frank Warren, I believe, is not licensed to promote in America at all. I don't know the last time he was lead promoter of a fight in America. Not certainly for the last couple of decades anyway. But again, you have to really protect your fighters and ask the question, someone should ask the question, does he have additional testing? Is he paying for additional testing for his fights? I believe Joe Joyce's fight has it because the management asked for it, but you've got to protect your fighters, and I don't know. Baluta, last night, was he tested? Absolutely not. And Frank will say, yeah, he was tested on the night, but what about the 12 weeks that he was preparing? The answer is no, because they don't want to pay for it, because that costs $30,000 to test Baluta, and that's probably more than his purse. So again, very difficult for small hall promoters to test at that level.
For anyone who may have been buying into Jessica McCaskill's theory or Frank Warren's theory, according to Eddie Hearn, Baumgardner's contract isn't even up. It doesn't end until April of next year. They're in the process of negotiating a new deal, and they were planning on putting her in the ring with the winner of Taylor versus Cameron too. So the idea that Matchroom would have chosen to sabotage her on the premise that she was going to leave them.
Eddie Hearn is denying that outright. So is Alicia.
Make of that what you will. Here's what I know. If by some chance it works out to where Alicia is able to proceed with her boxing career uninterrupted by all of this, what would be a best-case scenario, public perception of the fighter amongst their biggest critics in this situation, it's not going to change. Some people are always going to look at her as a dirty fighter.
No matter what she says, no matter how this ends, that's how some people's minds work. That's how it is.
And in the midst of Matchroom's pet fiasco involving Alicia Baumgardner, Frank Warren, one of Frank Warren's boys,
Tete,
has been banned from boxing for 4 years, backdated a year to his last fight.
Tete.
After testing positive for the banned substance stanzanol in a UCAT drug test around the time of his win over Jason Cunningham in July of 2022, over a year ago, Frank Warren has revealed, and you will notice that the attitude and the outrage over Zolani Tete's positive test.
Tete.
Nobody's trying to nail Frank Warren to the wall. Nobody's trying to crucify him. Nobody's implying that he sabotaged Zolani Tete's.
Tete.
It's not as big a controversy, not as big a fiasco. It's not getting talked about anywhere near as much as Alicia's situation, even though essentially it's two fighters testing positive for a banned substance. Shouldn't the energy and the attitude be the same towards both situations? And it so obviously isn't.
One is getting a lot more coverage from the media outlets, the YouTube boxing community, and the boxing community at large, and the other's barely getting talked about.
Zolani Tete currently is about 35 years old. If he's banned for the next 3 years, that means he won't be eligible to box again until sometime at or around 38, going on 39.
His situation was adjudicated by the BBBOC and UCAD, whereas with Alicia, it is different because her situation is happening in America.
Should we expect to see Alicia banned for the next 3 or 4 years, the same as Zolani?
Zolani Tete.
Don't think that'll be the case. What I've seen more often than not with these situations that happen here stateside on American soil is they might issue out a year ban, which is then reduced to a 6-month ban, provided that the fighter cooperates with an investigation.
Zolani Tete.
Zolani's situation was adjudicated by way of the BBBOC and UCAD. Over there in the United Kingdom, in the United States, it's different.
I don't think Alicia will face a 4-year ban, but the damage to her reputation and public perception of her, that damage is done.
Because the wound is still fresh, it seems a lot worse than it actually is, because need I remind you that Tyson Fury tested positive for nandrolone, Jarrell Miller tested positive on 2 separate occasions for more than one banned substance each time. Dillian White's got, 3 ped fiascos?
At this point, it's tel damage in the sport of boxing, these kinds of situations. And if nothing else, the moral of that story is that it's not the end of the world, and it doesn't have to be the end of Alicia Baumgardner's career, irrespective of whether you think she's innocent or guilty.
What about Zolani?
For him, it's different because he's in his mid-30s and this is a 3-year ban. That's not saying that he can't come back to the sport at age 38, but he will have lost considerable time.
With time, you lose considerable ability, the gradual decay of time, the old saying that Father Time, he's undefeated. He's going to catch up to you sooner or later. By the time that Zolani Tete returns to the sport of boxing at age 38, time is the one thing you don't get back.
Whereas Alicia is younger, she's got more time, and I'm not sure that she'll face a 3 or 4 year ban here in America.
For better or worse, the penalties in association with doping scandals are not as harsh in America. Adjudication is not as taxing for a fighter in the States as it is in the United Kingdom. I think what we're looking at the very most is a year ban downgraded to a 6-month ban, provided that Alicia cooperates with the powers that be to conduct their investigation.
She'll be out for a few months.
Perhaps the rest of this year, and given the damage this has done to public perception of the fighter and their reputation, that might be what's best for her, staying out of the public eye for the time being, because no matter what she says, people are going to label her a dirty fighter, some of them.
What about the belts?
Talked about that in my previous video. Down there at super featherweight, former champions Delphine Persoon of Belgium and Hyun-Mi Choi of South Korea. Hyun-Mi Choi's in a pole position to pick up the WBA title if Alicia is stripped of it, and the other 3, Delphine Persoon is in position to pick up the other 3 if Alicia is stripped. It's unfortunate.
But that's reality.
Doping scandals in the sport of boxing have only become more prevalent over time as anti-doping testing has become more prevalent over time. That many more fighters are having these kinds of situations, which gives you the impression that doping in the sport of boxing is more widespread than people realize.
This can happen to anyone from Tyson Fury to Canelo Alvarez to Alicia Baumgardner.
All levels of the sport, every corner of it, you are seeing more and more of these situations over time, and no one is immune. Not the men, not the women, not the contenders, the challengers, or the champions.
Not the obscure fighters that most people don't know, not the big name fighters, the fighters that people are familiar with. No one is immune.
Strange that Michaela Mayer, Alicia's domestic rival, hasn't taken any shots at her, any opportunity to chime in on all of this and tell people what she thinks. That's peculiar.
She's got no shortage of nice things to say about Alicia any other time.
But it's a mess. The whole thing is a mess. These things usually are. Men's lightweight news. Word round the campfire seems to be, at least according to Noonan Boy Promotions in Australia, that Kambosos versus Lomachenko, world title Summer Stadium fight down under in motion. The fight that was meant to be in 2022 has now circled back, and talks are getting louder. A clash of unfinished business in Australia is set to take place. It's important to note that when Noonan Boy Promotions says summer,
our summer is coming to an end, whereas in Australia, summer hasn't started yet.
Summer is set to begin. In the Northern Hemisphere, wintertime in the Northern Hemisphere is summertime in the Southern Hemisphere. That's the way that works out. And essentially what that means is that before this year is out, we could see Vasyl Lomachenko rebounding off the loss to Devin Haney, the quote-unquote loss.
Robbery!
Boxing is a funny old game. Many feel that Vasyl Lomachenko should have won his last fight, and many feel that George Kambosos should have lost. As it stands, it happened the other way around. George was given a decision many feel he didn't deserve, and Vasyl Lomachenko was robbed of one. And now it looks like he could be in a title fight before this year is out opposite the ring George Kambosos, much to the chagrin of Shakur Stevenson, who not that long ago accused Vasyl Lomachenko of ducking him. Let's not pretend. Let's not act.
You wonder that this wasn't their plan all along and we're just now getting hip to it, because in George Kambosos' last fight, he fought a southpaw in Maxie Hughes, like Vasyl Lomachenko is a southpaw. Maybe we didn't realize it then that he was getting ready to fight Loma.
And that's why he fought a southpaw in Maxie Hughes, because all this time he knew that at the end of the year, he might be fighting Vasyl Lomachenko. I can't imagine what kind of headspace Vasyl Lomachenko is in and how much more he has deep down on the inside to give to the sport of boxing. The rumors suggest that this fight could be a title fight. But as disheartening as that loss was for Vasyl Lomachenko, who many feel should be this division's undisputed champion now,
He still should be able to beat George Kambosos. George ain't on the level.
very recently, Bob Arum was asked about a Stevenson versus Lomachenko fight, and he blew off that idea, saying that Lomachenko wanted to take some time off, that because of the crisis in Ukraine, the war between Russia and Ukraine still rages on, and it's near approaching Vasyl Lomachenko's neck of the woods, he wants to take some time off to deal with that.
Deal with it how?
Just wait until Shakur Stevenson catches wind of this. If this news turns out to be official and news breaks that Vasyl Lomachenko will be returning before the end of this year, but not to fight Shakur, that duck word's going to get thrown around, and I can hardly blame anyone.
What are you supposed to say?
The fight with Shakur, if Vasyl Lomachenko were going to have it, would have been for the WBC title. Most are expecting that Devin Haney will vacate the titles he currently holds at 135. If he does, Gervonta Davis has still got the WBA regular title.
Shakur's in line to fight for the WBC.
He's also in line to fight for the WBO, as is Vasyl Lomachenko, who's ranked right behind him. And by way of the IBF, you will notice that George Kambosos, he's ranked at number 2.
Vasyl Lomachenko ranked right behind him at number 3. At number 1 is little-known George Lemos.
Argentinian slugger most are not familiar with. Push comes to shove and they want to do a Lomachenko versus Kambo fight for a newly vacated IBF title. I don't think the powers that be are going to let George Lemos stand in the way of that.
Conversations are already being had. Excuses, as they were, are already being made that Vasyl Lomachenko's not ducking Shakur Stevenson by fighting George.
We're going to pretend that the threat level is the same, that the threat level for a George Kambosos fight is akin to the threat level for a Stevenson fight? Come on.
We know it isn't.
So the question really is, are you okay with this? Is it okay for Vasyl Lomachenko to take on George, who to many would seem like a tune-up fight, en route to a possible Stevenson fight, if he ever fights him?